super fired up today, and I know I kind of say that every week, every show, but another first today. So our last show was the first time we had ever talked about cannabis on the show, and today it's the first time I've ever had guests come on and bring me stock certificates, and it's like what an inspirational way to start a show is with a couple of founders that I have recently invested into. So full disclosure, our guests today are one of the Haney, one of my newest ventures that I invested into. It's Opeeka, Kate Cordell and Ken Knecht. They're the co-founders of Opeeka, and today we're going to be talking about their business. It's an early stage company that is got a lot of upside. So we're going to be talking about the business. We're going to get to know them. And hopefully learn a little bit today too, because what's it like to grow a business and go out and seek funding and kind of walk through that process a little bit. So again, why don't we start off with Kate? Let you give a little bit of your background and maybe an overview of Opeeka.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me and for having us. I really appreciate the invitation.
Yeah,
to,
and by the way, Mark, don't tell any of the investors about the stock certificates. You're the first.
Shoot.
I just don't want
okay.
yeah.
Well, thank you very much. I love it.
Awesome. So I'm Kate Cordell, and my background is that I've actually been working in the mental illness research space my entire career. I actually started out at the lab bench doing cell and molecular biology, looking at if there were discovering new drugs to treat mental illness. So we actually worked with schizophrenic brains, doing DNA, getting the DNA out of the tissue samples and looking for new drugs to treat schizophrenia and other diseases. Actually, I have a patent out of that for a drug in dementia, and but really fell in love with the data. I set up a robotics laboratory for that drug discovery program, programmed the robotics, learned that once you have a high throughput screen that you get a lot of data, and I just fell in love with the data. I fell in love with the data side of things. So I actually pivoted and went into in silico AI drug discovery. So I started working for a software company that did in silico drug discovery. And that's where I fell in love with AI. Got my master's in statistics at San Diego State in epidemiology, so master's in public health, epidemiology with a focus on statistics. And then took that AI skill set and began looking at neurological and mental illness in mice. So actually out at Jackson Labs here in West Sac was with them. And
mental illness in mice.
Well,
Who would have thunk?
Yeah. But I was able to use the statistical, AI experience that I had to look at mice on treadmills and see as they degenerated and their gait started to get, fatigued and stuff over time, and use the AI to model their gait degeneration on the treadmill. So yeah, mice on treadmills.
It's interesting. You and I are probably opposites in many ways. So I'm a C student, Oakmont High School, and when you start using vocabulary words that I haven't learned yet, it makes me, it intimidates me a little bit. So I look forward to making sure that you break it down for me as we go through. So now the business, though, the overarching business now of Opeeka does what?
Yeah, so having done that medical model focus on mental illness, I really felt like there was a social component that was missing. So at Opeeka, we add a whole person view to mental health and well-being. So not just the medical model, but the social, biological, psychological, environmental, the entire person, a whole person well-being. So that's what we focus on, not just the medical side.
So using data to help the whole person from
That's
a
correct.
mental standpoint.
Yeah, so the way that care works now is you get very dissected into different, areas of care. So your doctor's going to have one, view of your well-being, and your psychologist will have another view of your well-being, and your social worker might have another view. And for those who get mental health in different places, like at schools, that they'll have another view. And so you end up being dissected into all these different pieces while you get care. And so what we do is we try to unify that back to a whole person so that you can understand your own well-being and And so the care providers can look at the types of care you're receiving from around that circle of care providers.
Very interesting. Okay, Ken,
Yes.
a little bit of your background and
Yes.
what attracted you to this opportunity?
Oh, wow. Well, so my background's in technology. I've always been an entrepreneur since from a very young age. So I've always had that entrepreneur spirit. So technology, I started my first web development company as soon as I took my first web development class at Chico State. Just fell in love with it. I just was like, I was in school for graphic design, and I still do design work, but I just fell in love with the immediacy of the internet and how fast you can publish something and get it out to the world. So I just it was no looking back for me. So I just I started my own company before college ended, web development, and then I got into worked with several startups from then on, helping them kind of build out their digital products. So.
Yeah, and then then you, Opeeka. What's the
So Kate and I were running our own consulting firms, and she actually hired me to work on a few projects, and she brought me in, and I was just fascinated by just how much need there is, and how much is not being done to show outcomes. So Kate brought me in on a few projects, and I was like, wow, it's amazing, just the amount of need there is in the space, and the stuff that Kate was doing just blew my mind. She was working on these different projects throughout the state, and I was helping her kind of put some visuals around that to make it look like a product. She would just give me these chicken scratch drawings and say, this is kind of what I'm thinking. And so I would take it and put it into something that looks usable as a piece of software.
Oh, interesting. So what led to the launch of the business? How was that inspired?
Yeah, that's a good question. So actually, so I was starting to put together the best of show of the work that I'd done in these various solutions over the years for different counties and states. And we actually got a call to present for what a solution could look like. And we hadn't built it yet. So we put together our best virtual would it be vaporware?
I call them high fidelity mock-ups, but they're probably less than that. But we put together some mock-ups, and that was our first year was out pitching mock-ups.
Okay.
Yeah.
Stitching them together to make it look like software, but it was just pictures.
Yeah.
So you knew from the beginning that this problem existed, that that the patient or the person was getting treatment from these different areas, and yet it wasn't rolled up so that overarching decisions could be made on what to do.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And so we saw the need was out there. Folks knew the need was out there. They asked us, there was no solution. They asked us to mock it up based on, I had solved that problem here and there over time. I had merged, mental health data with child welfare data so that you could get a better picture of a kid that's in foster care that has mental illness or has mental health treatment. And so I had solved like little pieces and parts of this, but it needed a whole solution. It needed something enterprise. And so that's what we did. We built the vision of and tested it out to see if people were receptive to it, and they were. And we said, this is something we've got to do. Interesting.
So you think about these, you mentioned 3 different types of caregiver: the social worker, the psychiatrist, and the doctor, the medical doctor. There may be other people that are treating as well. But then the data rolls up, and it goes to who? Does it go to all 3, or does it go to who wants that data?
Yeah, it goes to everyone.
Okay.
It goes to the doctors, the social workers, the probation officers, the school psychologist, whoever is in that care circle for a person, and the person themselves. And it goes to that person themselves. Everybody owns their own data still, so no data actually leaves ownership, but you're able to specifically share on information when a person's co-served between these various providers.
Okay, so that data gets aggregated on an individual, and then it rolls up. What format would somebody get the data in? Does it come up with a prescription, or does it come up with a report?
Yeah, we build story maps.
Okay.
So a story map would basically be a visual representation of you and your well-being. And so we build this story map so you can see if you're a doctor and you're going in there and you're looking at diabetes management, and maybe there's a behavioral health component related to diabetes management, and you know that this person is also being treated for a mental health issue. and you want to work together, then that would be an area where we can, if the mental health provider is outside your system of care or outside your system, they're on a totally different system, that's where we unify that information and we build this story map. So even if you're looking at information you don't understand, it's all tagged to let you know that the other provider felt this was a concern. And so you get this visual representation of the person's story, and then it tracks the change over time. So you can see somebody transform their life in care as they proceed through that trajectory of recovery.
So thinking about this, maybe we can kind of break down maybe almost like an example. So I'm thinking about diabetes and maybe somebody that's got a mental illness. How might those be related?
Yeah, so if we go back to the youth in foster care example, so if you have a youth in foster care, diabetes management is, going to be a need that follows them throughout a lot of placement changes, right? And if they're young, then they're going to need help with that. And so their foster caregivers, as they come into care, would have access to their story map and know more information about their diabetes management, how it's been going in the past. The child themselves would be able to track their own diabetes management as well as how that affected their well-being. So when they weren't managing their diabetes very well, they would actually see in their story map that their anxiety level or their depression level had increased. And so they could see this association between how they're doing in different areas of their well-being and their overall well-being. So both for the person themselves, their caregivers, as well as for a broader view of all of those areas for the providers that are in their care circle.
So if you get an early stage company like this, and it sounds like there's a lot of different directions you could take it, or a lot of areas that you could focus. And so it makes me sort of wonder, how do you decide how to allocate your focus, your resources?
That's a great question, Mark. There's so many things that this can apply to. So we've had to be super diligent on kind of where we're going to stay, what lane we're going to be in, right? Especially our investors, that's important to them. They want us to be focused, and we are. So there's a lot of areas that people talk about that we could apply to, but right now we're focused on child welfare a lot, because that's, the kids there, complex needs. They have the most complex needs, and they're multi-system evolved, a lot of them. So being able to communicate that story across systems is super important.
So you're communicating the system, you're building this story map, and then who's the customer? So you've got this offering, who buys it?
Right. So our first product is our person-centered intelligence solution, P-CIS. It's really for the workers, the clinicians, and people who oversee the work that's being done in these different organizations, so they can see if what they're doing is actually working for the particular person. Okay,
so are these large organizations? Is your customer sort of an enterprise type customer?
You know what? It's all over. It's kind of all over the place. It can be very large. It can be states. It can be down to community-based organizations that use our software.
Okay. So thinking about this business model, is it how do you grow it? Do you create partnerships? Is there a sales force?
Yeah, I mean, it's when Kate and I started this, we were thinking, we might not ever need a sales force for this, because Kate has such good connections out there. Kate is a heck of a seller. I'll just say that right here. She can really sell.
I'm not surprised.
I don't think she knows it, but she's great. We have through partnerships is another big way. So we're working with the people who write the assessments, the authors of the assessments, and they want their assessments to be used and be able to track outcomes from those. So they love our software because it shows that. We've partnered with England, for example. The country of England has partnered with us, and we're actually rolling out our software throughout England, which is great. They have a lot of the same things that are going on.
It's kind of amazing. A country partnered with you. That's a big customer.
It is, and it came on pretty early. Where it's like we were just getting started. We didn't have the software built yet, and they were coming on, and we're like, how do we say no? I mean, this is England. We got to make this work. So we went through all the legal stuff. That was where a lot of our initial funding went to kind of take care of all that. Mm-hmm. But we had to get legal representation over in England, and then the GDPR. We had to look into that. So there was it was kind of a big hurdle, but we got through it. But it was hard for an early stage company like us to take on something that big.
So yeah, when you bring on a customer like England, I've never had anybody say that their customer was England.
That's crazy.
That's the first too. But you think about that, how much onboarding has to go into something like that? There must be certain parts of the software that England needs because they're England and because they have their own way that they want it? Is it? I'm sure you customize it for them at some level.
No.
No. Okay. Well, how does that work? You have something off the shelf that England wants to buy.
Yes. Because we stay really focused on the person. We're person-centered, and people in England all have the same body parts, same, psychology, same medication use, same everything. There's no difference, really. Now, they do say things funny. No.
They talk funny.
They talk funny.
I've seen Austin Powers.
Yeah.
And a lot of them don't have good dental hygiene.
So I've had to create marketing material. So the marketing material we built in the website, so I've had to redo that completely for England. And
Yeah.
they gave me like a roadmap of what to say. And no, don't say this word, say this word. So it's been kind of interesting. But
And you can pick your language from the top, and if you want English, then you get a lot of U's in your behaviors.
Interesting. So in the business model, they take the product as it is off the shelf, but then you have to help them put it into their market, right? Into their user base, so that it's adopted, so that there's people that want to use it.
Well, we've partnered with an organization in England that is I guess, an advocate over there, as well as a trainer and a support person. So the outcomes of care in England oversees a lot of the onboarding. So
they are a true partner. I mean, they've hired staff specifically to help our rollout there.
Wow.
So
Okay. So if you don't mind, maybe tell us how you make money. So England uses it, and do they pay you some kind of licensing fee? Do they pay you per transaction? How does it work?
Yeah, so our business model charges per person in care. So if, for example, we actually have a domestic abuse shelter that uses our software. Now, they don't share their data with anyone, but the other thing we offer is that ability to track change over time. So if they want to see the transformation in the families that they serve, they can just use our software as standalone for that. Coming back to your question, the onboarding process is pretty simple. You just calibrate whatever you want to monitor, whether that be of diabetes outcomes, or you want to monitor mental health indicators or wellness indicators, and then you start using our software.
Yeah, we really try and take out the complexities. There's always a lot of barriers put up when it comes to technology, especially on how we're going to make two systems talk to one another. But Kate and I really kind of we kind of boiled it down to make it a lot simpler for people to understand.
We're doing something different, I would say. I'd say we're thinking about the problem differently. We're not trying to boil the ocean. So a lot of times if data sharing is talked about, or you talk about whole person care, you'll just get overwhelmed, because it's like, you got this data model, you got the E8 electronic medical records and electronic health records, and you've got case management. We don't do that. We say, let's start with one question at a time. What is it we're interested in tracking for this family in terms of their own well-being? And they can define that themselves. What's important to me is having a safe place to stay. So let's track that. That's the outcome we're tracking, safe place to stay, okay? So right now you don't have a safe place to stay. You don't feel safe. On a scale of 1 to 10, your safety is a 1. Going back to that domestic abuse shelter. Now, as you work with that family and you work with their trauma and you work with an ability to find a safe place to stay, whether that be a gated community or another community outside away from the perpetrator, then you watch their indicators go up. And now they're at a 2, now they're at a 4. And now you can see change over time till that family feels safe. And that could be the only thing you're tracking. But if that family has complex needs in a lot of other areas, then you build that story around that family and track all of those different indicators until they reach the point where they feel self-sufficient and can move on their own.
How much does the tracking, how does the data change people's lives?
So that's a good question. So first of all, I would say we're very strength and resilience factor focused. And I think if you sit down with a lot of the folks that are in care, the system tends to look at what are the problems. What are your problems? What are your symptoms? Where you're deficient? And one thing that we do as part of the data is help people recognize their strengths. And that, if you start looking at your strengths and tracking your strengths, you build resiliency, you build those protective factors to help you with the areas that are the problem. So one way data can help is just to make you aware. You're aware that you have high anxiety. You're aware that you're tired. You're aware that you have a strength. So it's the awareness that we're bringing around the problems so that we can begin to address them.
So your high anxiety, that data is captured through one of your caregivers. You told your caregiver, or you answered a question that indicated that you have high anxiety, and so okay.
Yeah.
So gotcha.
Yeah. And so, it's just like if you go into the doctor and they ask you, what's your pain level today on a scale of 1 to 10? And you're like, oh, it's a 9 today, doctor. And they look and they see what you said last time. Oh, he's up. It's the same idea. So where's your anxiety level today? And there's assessments out there, psychometric tools to track various levels of well-being, but nobody brings that all together and looks at a whole person.
Yeah. I mean, these assessments you fill out, I mean, we've all filled them out in doctors' offices. What happens to those? I never recall one time filling that out and the next time coming in, the doctor saying, oh, I see you've changed since the last time. Nobody lays out those assessments across the table and looks at longitudinal data. That's kind of what we're doing. We're looking at those assessments longitudinally and looking for patterns of resilience and recovery.
So what's the big dream for the company? Where do you take it? You grabbed England, brought them on as a client, but what does the company look like in 5 or 10 years?
Yeah, I mean, I think we want to be our mission is to put the person at the center of care. So not to have the person try to figure out from all this fragmented system of care how to find well-being, but for the person to understand what their well-being is and to be able to create a care circle around them. So I know that's a little esoteric. So in 5 or 10 years, I really hope that we are a tool that helps people understand their own well-being, how to improve their well-being, and then helps their care providers understand whole person, them as a whole person, and not just as a very small fragment of that person.
Okay.
And I think it's important to make the distinction. Our software does not provide care, and we have to say that over and over because there's so many apps coming out in the market, and you see headlines every day about these apps that are getting funded and making billions of dollars. We don't provide care. We show you what care is working for you.
Yeah.
And does it roll up, if I remember correctly, this data rolls up so that people can manage caregivers, so that if you're a caregiver, you can kind of see what's happening. Let's take a large healthcare organization, and they have caregivers throughout. They want to know how things are tracking with their caregivers so they can manage their people.
Yeah, for sure. You want to see from an organization, you want to see who you're helping really well and who you're not doing so well with, so you can do training. There's a lot of oversight built into our software. So, counties may be using it, but the state can look at it and say, okay, we need to focus more on this type of situation or type of problem and less on this other one. So who are we serving well and who can we serve better?
Yeah, and I'd like to say too that we take a success focused approach. So a lot of times outcomes will look at who's going to fail, who's going to recidivate, who's going to cost me the most. It's a very negative kind of approach to looking at data. We turn that model on its head and say, how can we help everyone succeed, even the people that would otherwise be predicted to fail in whatever program we have? What did it take to get a person like this person with all the circumstances and complicated issues that are in this person's life to succeed and get on that trajectory of recovery? So we make those associations to say, hey, people like this with a story like this tend to do better with this type of intervention. So we're actually identifying what intervention works best for whom based on the whole person's story.
Who would be the ideal customer in the Sacramento market? Are there clients that you might have your eye on here?
Well, it seems like we've talked to everybody, but
okay.
Maybe Kate's done a ton of demos.
Who would be somebody who would get some benefit out of this?
Yeah, so here in California, there was a fairly recent bill, AB 2083, and that bill is a bill that requires counties like Sacramento County to create a system of sharing of information to serve youth that have a youth in foster care with traumatic experience. So what that means is that, in Sacramento County and in every other county in the state, that schools, probation, foster care, so child welfare, medical doctors are all required to share information about these kids so that they can serve the whole kid and not just part of the kid. That is exactly what we've been designed to do. So we can facilitate that information sharing and build that story map for that kid.
Okay. And then who would the customer be? You've got the counties, somebody's requiring it, and then you've got a school and other caregivers. Who's the actual customer?
All of them. So
Anybody who uses it.
Anyone. So the school can decide, you know what, we want to use P-CIS so that we get those story map in a better view, and we can easily see the progress over time for our kids that are getting behavioral health treatments. And then as soon as they sign on, let's say behavioral health says, okay, yeah, we'll join too. They sign on. Now they each have their own space in our system, but now they can set up a care circle, and they do that all on their own. They say, you know what, I want to share Joey with his information on these particular indicators with the school, because I think it's important for them to know how Joey's doing in these areas. And the school can say, I'm not sharing everything, but there's a couple questions about Joey, maybe how many days he's been absent in the last 30 days or how many suspensions he's had that are behavioral health related, and I'm going to let the behavioral health provider know about that. And so they can set up a care circle and share just the information that's important for each other to know and communicate around that so they can better serve Joey together.
Okay, so let's talk about building the business. So we have entrepreneurs and people who would like to be entrepreneurs out there that are thinking about raising money and taking an early stage technology type company and taking it to the moon. You came in here, we were just talking before the show, you came into my office, I think in December of 2019, I think we agreed. So a year and a half ago, and we were sitting, I do these hanging with Haney's where entrepreneurs get together and commiserate and talk about how great we're going to be and so on. And so I had, I remembered you and it was good, but you, at that stage, you guys were at the very, very beginning stages. A lot's happened since then. Now you've begun to bring on investors and so on. Yeah. Maybe walk me through sort of what's happening, and then what are the big obstacles you're facing today?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, when we were here last time, we were at the very beginning. Kate and I were actually doing our road shows down in the Bay Area, doing all those pitches, and it was a very interesting time. At that time, mental health was just kind of like people really didn't understand it, and a lot of people still don't. But this was pre-pandemic, so the pandemic has actually brought about a ton of awareness to mental health. It's such a big issue now, and before the pandemic, it was like 1 in 5 adults were suffering from some type of mental illness. Now the stat is 1 in 3, so it's become a huge issue. And so a lot more people, and the stigma's been removed. A lot more people are talking about it, and it's okay. People are a lot more open to mental illness and talking about it and getting treatment for it.
Okay, but then you've have you developed your product since then? What you're pitching before, and now you've got England, right? So walk me through that.
Yeah, so the product's ever evolving. I think it's at a spot now. I think Kate said the other day on a demo, it's like the product's reached a point where we even better than we thought it would be. So I think it's constantly evolving, and every time we do a demo, we're seeing new things that our developers put in, and we're like, wow, this is really taking shape.
Any learnings from that? So you building out the product during COVID. Obviously, COVID helped the product get more acceptance in a market, but you had a chance to focus during this this downtime, I suppose. Now your product is more ready for prime time.
Absolutely.
Any learnings about that?
Yeah, I think everybody kind of went into hibernation for a bit. About there were people we were talking to before the pandemic about the software kind of just disappeared for a while. Because nobody knew what was going to happen. So
the healthcare providers were focused on COVID, or maybe even just the unknown. People who managed things were at home, working from home.
Yeah, I think it was a lot of unknown. People just didn't know kind of where we were headed, and so things kind of stood still. But that was good because it gave us time to really put our heads down and get some work done.
Okay.
And as far as fundraising goes, I have to mention Roger Akers. He's a friend of ours, and Roger's what can I say about the guy? He's just amazing, and he's helped us a great deal throughout this journey.
What did Roger do?
Yeah, so when we were here in December, we had a 150-page design specification of exactly what we wanted to build, and Roger worked with us to figure out how to build that. First of all, he helped us build that technology team to build the software, and we broke ground. So we were here in December. We broke ground on the technology in May. on May 1st. So, and then we launched December 1st. But because we knew exactly what we wanted, we had it out. I mean, with his high fidelity mock-ups.
We had the developers a silver platter and like, this is what we want. There was no guesswork.
Exactly.
Typically, I've done a lot of development projects. People come in with ideas, but that's all they are, ideas. Maybe something on a napkin. Here, build this.
We had it all.
We left
mapped
no.
out.
We left no areas that were.
When you push this button, this happens. We push that button, this happens. We had it mapped. So, and not to say there weren't any gaps. We certainly, once we broke ground, I was like, oh yeah, we didn't think about that. Okay, we mapped that out. But we were ready to go.
So Roger prompted some of those decisions.
Yep. He helped us figure out how to take that from a dream on a page to reality. So that was huge. That was the first thing he did. And I remember we toasted with him the night that we broke ground or started building the technology. And it was like, okay, this is, you're really, and I'm like, okay, here we go. But if you build it, right, they will come. And that was, at that point, that's where we're at. It was a gamble. Will actually people show up on this baseball field if we plow the field? So that's where we were in May, a year ago. And launched. We had
in the heart of work from home.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
People panicking, and
Yeah.
Yep.
Exactly.
Oh,
you guys are cranking.
We are.
Yeah.
We are. Yeah.
We were cranking. Yeah. And I guess with we knew that mental health concerns were going to go through the roof because people were isolated, right? And we can't ignore this problem forever. We just knew that this was going to be a problem, even more of a problem that's going to have to be solved after the pandemic. So we hit the gas even harder. We said, this is needed. This is something that's definitely needed.
And I'll say that our focus, I mentioned child welfare is kind of where we're starting because there's the most need. I'd say the pandemic brought about more need for that age for the young people. I think they say 50% of all mental illness is determined by the age of 14, 75% by the age of 24. I mean that's big. Think about that. And the pandemic, what it's done for young people. I mean, being out of school, and there's a lot of kids now that they don't want to go back to school. Yeah, so it's I think that's our biggest focus now because I think there's the biggest need there.
Yeah. And workforce well-being too. So we can do that as well. So if you want to figure out why your workforce is, why people are quitting, not wanting to come back to work. So that whole workforce well-being too is part of what we do. So any kind of well-being, we're able to look at how that changes over time, not only as a system, but also as individuals within that system.
I want to get back to Rogers Acres for a second because I want to make sure that a takeaway from this show should be you put the right people in your life
100%.
And it can be game changing. It sounds like Roger, even on the product side, was game changing, and because it prompted you to accelerate, and sometimes it's just making some hard decisions, and saying it's go time. But then, obviously, in order to scale this type of business, you made the decision to go out and get outside funding, and I'm sure Roger had an impact there because that's how I got re-engaged.
Absolutely. No, Roger. I mean, to go back to Roger, I've known Roger for a number of years just through other businesses I've worked with around the area. And so it was always in the back of my mind when, as Kate and I were working on this product, I was like, I'm going to pull in Roger at some point. And I think he'll be super excited about this. And sure enough, when I first pulled him in, I showed him our business plan we had at the time, and he was like, what is this? I mean, this needs a lot of work. And we were like, oh, we felt we got it down, but we kept, we were persistent. And Roger just, he grabbed hold and he said, we're going to do this thing. And he helped us every step of the way. And opening doors for us has been amazing. I mean, the community of angel investors in Sacramento, I had no idea. I mean, it's amazing, just the group of wonderful people here we have to work with.
Well, it's interesting. Who you take advice from makes all the difference in the world. And who you put Roger is a man that I respect tremendously. And so he would be somebody he would be one of my first calls as well. So I love that you did that. That's why I'm re-engaged. Now from here, you've, I mentioned at the beginning of the show that you brought me some stock certificates. So what did that fundraising activity look like? Is that behind you or is it ongoing?
It's behind us. We closed our seed series, so we're really happy about that and pleased with that. We're hoping that gives us enough runway to get a few of these larger clients on board, which I think we will, and kind of help us carry out our vision. But if we it's not out of the question that we might look at a Series A. So we want to make sure we keep our investors engaged and stay busy.
Yeah, I'm sure Roger. So is there? You said you might look at a Series A. Is there a roadmap that you've projected in terms of fundraise? I mean, some companies decide they're going to put their effort in raising money from their customers, but in many cases, to grow fast, you end up taking more outside capital.
For sure. I think right now we're kind of feeling it out. We're seeing how things are going with customers' interest. Right now, we're seeing a ton of interest. So we may get approached from it's another client that we don't see coming, our customer, and it could force us into a situation where we're like, okay, we need to scale rapidly, and we have to go back out and do some fundraising, which is not easy work. Fundraising is hard work. So thank God for Roger. He helped us a tremendous amount there.
Roger was invaluable in the fundraising. It was a lot of work, but Roger was always pitching up the softballs, and we were swinging.
Yeah. Roger always says work harder, and that guy, he's one of the hardest working people I know.
He works really
it's
hard.
It's amazing because, a guy like Roger could be doing a lot of things in his life, and he's
absolutely.
He's spending time with the most it's fun. I have to admit that, it's very rewarding to spend time with ambitious people and people who are on a mission to change the world. You're on a mission to change healthcare, and that's inspiring for Roger. I know it is.
For sure.
It's inspiring for me to be around it as well. So
you've got to you got to believe in the vision, and you've got to really just believe in the people that you're working with. I think Roger's always said from day one that I like you as people. And that's why I'm here and doing what I'm doing.
So what's the big hurdle now? So you've got the fundraising behind you. Sounds like the product's built, the funding is there. Now what's the big hurdle today?
The big hurdle today is we've got a number of smaller customers. We need a large customer onboarded. So that's our big hurdle today, is getting the big fish in the boat.
And it's not to say England's not big.
Right.
They're just,
right.
They're
big.
Island, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
they're big, but they're starting out small. It's kind of,
Okay.
I won't call it a pilot because I hate that word. It's just they're doing a slow rollout.
Okay.
But we're working with the largest provider of mental health over in England to roll them out. But it's a slow process.
Slow process, yeah.
So a big customer, I tried to kind of sneak that out of you a little bit ago. Are there big customers in Sacramento?
There would be medium-sized customers.
Medium-sized customers in Sacramento.
A whole state. We want a whole state.
Okay, a whole state to
a whole
bring
state agency, like all of Medicaid mental health in a state, or all of child welfare in a state. We'd like,
and then have them integrated through their entire system.
That's right, exactly. We would like to unify health and human services for an entire state. So whatever health and human services programs they have, if people are involved in more than one, right now the data is very isolated. So for older adults, they're probably in many programs at once, and the state isn't able to track them between those different programs.
Is there funding set aside through the CARES Act and through the COVID relief stuff that's kind of set aside for this realm that you can kind of go attack?
I think there's a lot more funding right now post-COVID to address uniform care and to get address mental health and behavioral health as well. Traditionally, I'd say there probably wasn't, but I think there's a focus now. So that hopefully will help.
Yeah, I mean, I think the data sharing thing is huge. I mean, systems being able to work with one another, being able to share data, because a lot of times when these, let's just say kids, for example, have to go retell their story at each different organization, that's traumatizing. You don't want to do that. So it'd be good for a kid that needs, multiple systems to serve him to come in and see that they've already got an idea of what the story is and can jump right in and start helping.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I'm gonna switch the subject a little bit. You two are married.
No.
You're not married.
No,
No.
we're not.
Oh, I thought you two were married.
Married through work.
Married through work. Okay. Okay. So how does the relationship between the two of you work in terms of operationally?
Kate and I have a really, it's a great working relationship. We, like I said earlier, I'm kind of the creative end, and she's really the analytical. She's a statistician, so she comes up with some of these ideas and puts it on paper. And she's used to see some of the arts, works of art she's put together. It's pretty god awful, and I've got to take those and make them look pretty and work.
Okay.
So we have a really good relationship where I can really understand what she's trying to get across, and I can put that into a visual format that people can actually use.
Okay, so on founding teams, typically one person's in charge. Who's in charge?
Oh, I'm in charge all the time.
I don't even fight that one. I don't fight that at all.
All right, I love it. Okay, so thinking about this and the world that you're changing, maybe wrap up, if you don't mind, with some closing thoughts about the business, and then maybe some words of wisdom or some advice for that next person in line. You've had some lessons learned, so maybe you can share some of that with our audience.
Sorry, what was before lessons learned?
Lessons learned was just closing thoughts,
Closing
right?
thoughts,
Anything else
closing
you
thoughts.
would
Okay.
want to make sure that our audience knows,
Yeah.
And maybe there's a way to summarize this opportunity at some level.
Yeah. So closing thoughts. So, I think, boy, you have to have, you've got to, if you're going to do this, you got to be all in. That's definitely some closing thoughts is, this is not an easy path to take. This is a lot of work, and boy, we're dedicated. So, I don't think you should start a business unless you are passionate about the problem you're trying to solve. And I think you got to stay focused on the mission, because there's a lot of ways to be distracted, but if you can stay focused on that passion that you have to solve a problem, and I've always said I never wanted to start a business. I didn't set out to start a business. I set out to solve a problem, and I would have done that many different ways and tried to do it many different ways. I would have done it, where it didn't result in a business, but in the end, I realized, because the problem we're trying to solve is so overarching different systems, that no one area was going to see the big picture or spend the effort to solve the problem. It had to come from outside the system, because to unify everybody together around a person, the person wasn't going to pay for it. The doctor's not going to pay for it. The school's not going to pay for it. We've got to build it, and they will come. So, I was very passionate about solving this problem. Very, very passionate about that. And so I'd say, if you're, keep your passion, stay focused, have a passion.
How do you
and solve
keep the
that problem.
passion? How do you keep the passion?
I'm not sure I think it just comes from within. I'm not really sure where it comes from. I can't stop.
Well, Kate's passion is contagious. I mean, when I met her and we started doing this work together, that was the thing that kind of drew me in. It's like, wow, she's really passionate about this. And this need is so huge. I mean, this has to be something we work on. This has to be something we build. So at that point, I made a decision that never look back. We're going to build this.
Never look back. Great business opportunity. A proud investor, and really excited for how many lives you're going to change. And you're doing it right here in our backyard, and it's becoming a worldwide company from right here in little old Sacramento. So exciting. Kate, Ken, thank you for joining me. Best of luck on Opeeka, and look forward to being by your side along your growth trajectory.
Thank you so much, Mark.
All right,
Thanks for having us.
You bet. Thank you.
Thanks for watching today's show. My goal for every episode is that you find a takeaway, something tangible you can use in your business today. And if you have a comment about a favorite takeaway, feel free to put it in the box below. And if you have a topic that you'd like me to bring up on the show, don't forget to let me know. And also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel if you want to learn more about entrepreneurship. Because at Haney Biz, we are always by your side.